Yes, hello everyone. So, transfer rumours, are you sick of them already? Because I am. But this is not a transfer rumour video. This is potential board appointments, and I believe one of them is done, but it hasn't been made official. More on that in a second. But let's talk about the news that Newcastle United have potentially interviewed Canadian and 54-year-old David Hopkinson, who's been interviewed by Newcastle United to replace the outgoing Darren Eales, say the Daily Mail. Now, we know that Darren Eales, unfortunately, is suffering from cancer, and everyone's well wishes go out to him and his family, and hopefully he fights through it, and I'm sure he'll have all the support in the world from the professionals and family and friends and colleagues. But David Hopkinson has been interviewed according to the Mail, and I wanted to talk about a little bit about his background, because we are going to play an audio clip of him whilst he was at Real Madrid, and also we'll come on to the new director of football with the women's side in a second. But Hopkinson was most recently President and Chief Operating Officer at Madison Square Garden Sports Corporation, helping New York Knicks and New York Rangers. He's also, as I mentioned, worked at Real Madrid in charge of partnerships around the world. Plus, he has spent over 20-odd years, 23 years I think it is, as Chief Commercial Officer for the Maple Leaf Sport Entertainment Partnership, which also included MLS side Toronto. He's also currently right now a board member on the Canadian basketball. I don't know the official term. I know NBA is obviously America. I don't know if that crosses over. I couldn't tell you. Basketball is not my sport. But I wanted to play an audio clip of what his background was and how he was working at Real Madrid at the time. Have a look at this.
So after a career as long as I've had in North American sports, it's such a privilege to be working with a club with such an incredible legacy and a legacy of winning. This is a brand that has such impact around the world and for such a long time. Yes, how to utilize this digital audience in order to grow our business globally. What I will tell you is, as exciting as it is that we've got this audience, we have not cracked the code on how to really commercialize it yet. We're still doing it with partners and on their behalf, but actually directly monetizing that with the customer, we're not there yet. We're still working on that. And if any club tells you that they've figured out how to commercialize their digital social audience, please point me to whatever room that's in. I just don't think we're there yet. It's wonderful to have this scale. It's an incredible platform, but we're not there on commercializing it digitally yet. It's an exciting digital tool. Having worked in North American leagues for so long, you're doing regional deals, and even at a big city like Toronto, and big clubs like the NHL's Maple Leafs or the Raptors, you're still dealing with markets that are maybe, you get the whole Canadian market, 30 million. The opportunity at Real Madrid, honestly, to think about differently on scale, but also on cultural sensitivity.
So once again, the Mail claim that Newcastle have declined to comment on the interview process. So, it sounds good. Look, I'm not going to sit here. No Newcastle fan knows him, let's be honest. But his background is all about growing. And if he comes in as CEO, of course, he will be the lead guy with obviously the owners ahead of him, of course. But he'll be running the everyday, trying to build the club commercially on and off the pitch successfully. So we'll have to wait and see that if he moves to the next stage. But he is well thought of. He is well liked. So fingers crossed that Newcastle do get the right appointment. They don't want to rush it. But also, just to touch upon this, and this was interesting as well, that Newcastle are using a recruitment firm called Nolan Partners to search for a new sporting director. Especially if you look at the carry-on with the likes of Dan Ashworth and Paul Mitchell recently. Is it working at Newcastle? Because looking at those two, it's been a bit of a disaster. Like, when we all got Dan Ashworth, we all thought, oh, great. Look what he's done at England, all levels, male and female. Look what he's done at Brighton. But he wasn't even here 5 minutes, and he's running off to Man United for a bigger pay and a bigger project, or whatever you want to call it, and he didn't last long there either. And then we brought Paul Mitchell in, which we've talked about already, that we all know that Paul Mitchell and Eddie Howe didn't say eye, and obviously it seems that Eddie Howe will have more say in transfer market with the club, and I think that's only right. He's proven himself on the pitch, well, off the pitch at the side, but you know what I mean. So he's been given that more power. I believe he has now, and I said last week that he could go down as a Wenger or a Ferguson for us if he see a long term where he has more say on the club in general. I'm not talking about success because blooming hell, Fergie's a legend, whether you like him or not. But is it working? Do you need one? Can Eddie Howe work with Steve Nixon and the scouting team? Why not? Now, 2 weeks ago, I think it was 2 weeks ago actually, The Athletic claimed that Newcastle were set to appoint a new director of football for the women's side, which is going to be Grace Williams, who has worked at Crystal Palace, still is at Crystal Palace, I believe, at the moment. And they are correct in that. I've had it confirmed for someone who has extremely close links to Newcastle United women. And I wanted to play an audio about her role in the women's game, how she's found it hard because she's worked at the likes of Bristol City, Watford, the Welsh FA, Crystal Palace. Have a look at this.
Do a role, you've been hired to do a job, and there's a reason for that, so be confident in what you're trying to do. Be really honest about your weaknesses and about what you want to learn, and be the positive influence to be able to make what you're doing for the better. As a female, there are many barriers I've had to overcome in football, and that's been playing and working. One of my first experiences was walking into a boardroom and being asked that he would like milk and 2 sugars in his tea because I wasn't part of the board meeting. But you have to really stay strong for what you believe in and what you're there to do, to be able to overcome those, and it is getting a lot more positive in that. Know your value and know your role. You've been hired to do a role, you've been hired to do a job, and there's a reason for that, so be confident in what you're trying to do. Be really honest about your weaknesses and about what you want to learn, and be the positive influence to be able to make what you're doing for the better.
Cool. So she's admitted that she's had to face difficult challenges being a woman in women's sport, because I'm going to call it women's sport. She's in the female game, so she's got a great track record of going into a boardroom, which is probably male orientated, despite it being the female game. However, she's worked at several of clubs. She's got that pedigree of work in there. She's been a general manager at Bristol City and Watford, and it's a big step to come from Crystal Palace to Newcastle United. Of course it is. Obviously, she's just had success at Palace where they've got into the WSL. Obviously, they have been relegated this season, so they will be in the same league as Newcastle, and hopefully she can bridge the gap with Becky, help the club push on, and the dynamics will be very interesting to see how that relationship works with the director of football, because I think having someone who knows the game, the women's game in particular, rather than Paul Mitchell, and look, to be fair to Paul Mitchell, he did help bring in a couple of quality signings last season. However, recently the fallout with the release list, I'm not going to go into too much detail. I know a little bit about it, but it hasn't all gone down well to plan with some players and family members in particular as well. But it's not my place to speculate and accumulate and what have you. It hasn't been handled well. But as I say, it's positive for her to bring in because the women are desperate to get in the WSL and they're going hard this summer. Expect major changes, a lot of signings to come in as well. So you've got that, and then obviously you've got the club actively seeking a CEO, whether Hopkinson gets that or not. As the main guy at Newcastle United, we'll have to wait and see. Of course, you might have seen that the club announced the Seller Cup yesterday, which is great. And that's going to be men and women are playing against Atletico Madrid. Their counterparts, the lasses will play, and of course the men will play. So the lasses will play first. I think that's on the 8th or 9th of August off the top of my head. I haven't seen it. Look, I haven't read the article properly, but that'll be just when we get back from South Korea. Obviously, I'm heading out there, so I'll be bringing all the content from Singapore and South Korea, from all the events, all the fans, international fans, you name it. And just touch upon lastly a little piece of news yesterday that Brian Mbeumo is allegedly chosen Man United. Look, he's very talented. We all know that Matheus Cunha is very talented, and these are two fantastic players. You can't deny that. Yes, both are. I would love to have Brian Mbeumo. I've said that for 6 or 7 months. He's just gone on another level. 20 goals, man, for a winger. It's class. He's the second best winger in the league behind Mo Salah for me, on the terms of that right side. But if you just go ahead and choose Man United, because David Ornstein, who's more or less the British version of Fabrizio Romano, came out and said that, and if he does go to Man United, then obviously they're choosing money because they can offer a lot more wages because their commercial side just blows Newcastle away. However, they are in debt, which I don't know how that works, but look, I'm not a financial expert, but they can offer more wages. Yes, we can offer Champions League and other clubs can, but I think if he chooses Man United, then he's chosen money because he can pick an Arsenal, he can pick a Liverpool, he can pick a Newcastle or whoever, but obviously he's going to Man United. Look, whatever you think of Man United, they are worldwide known. Easy for me to say. But if he goes, then we'll have another target. Let's not cry about it. Let's not make rant videos about it. It's if he gans, he gans. So, but Man United have fallen from grace, and we love it. But yeah, we can't again crack as and pay high wages. We've got to get the right players despite having more money. But there's your wrap up. So I want to know what you think about Hopkinson. He's been interviewed according to the Mail. We're using a third party agency to help get a sporting director in, which I'm not really that keen on. Again, that comes from the Mail. And what do you think about having a director of football for the women's game to bridge that gap with helping on and off the pitch, commercially and transfers, as so on and so on. But there we go. There's your wrap up for the last 24 hours. Yes, there is other bits and bobs of speculation here, which we're not going to touch upon because it's just bullshit. But anyways, love yous and leave yous. Drop us a massive like on this video and we'll see you very soon on Newcastle Fans TV.